Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event in the Living Heritage Sharing Series. I am, as always, Jérôme Melançon. I've been advising the Vice President Research at the U of R around the question of living heritage. Over the past few months, with the help of the Humanities Research Institute, we created this series to develop research and partnerships around living heritage. So with this series, we hope to bring people together and offer a chance to researchers, those who run programs, those who are simply interested in living heritage across the province and beyond, usually, to learn more about the work that's being done. So we're more or less alternating this year between university and community presenters to offer a variety of perspectives and help each of us deepen our understanding of what living heritage and intangible cultural heritage are and can be. I do want to take a moment to mention, while you're all stuck listening to me here, that we have two events coming up over the next few weeks. Both have to do with memory and commemoration in different ways. On May 1st at 2 p.m., we are co-hosting the event commemorating the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, along with the Rwandan community abroad, Canada. So this will be a panel, so a bit different than our usual way of doing things. Now on May 5th at 1 p.m., Cindy Hansen will present on the duty to remember about the independent assessment process related to the Indian residential school settlements compensations for abuse. So as we know, we still have a lot to learn about the truth that must come before reconciliation, about how to learn about that truth. So I'll send out more information about these events shortly. I want to acknowledge that I'm hosting this event on the traditional territory of the Nahiawak, the Anishinaabe, the Dakota, and Nakoda, and on the homeland of the Métis, which is also Treaty 4 territory. And the U of R also has a presence on Treaty 6, and many of you are located there as well. Just to know before we get started that we're recording the formal part of this event. It'll be shared on the U of R's YouTube channel, but we'll cut that before the question and answer period that will follow. So for the fun stuff, our presenter for the session today is Dr. Sarah Abbott. She is Associate Professor in the Department of Film at the U of R. Her recent interdisciplinary doctoral research explored the sentient relationality of trees through public ethnography, Indigenous research methodologies, plant science, philosophies associated with the non-human turn, and film. Dr. Abbott has been making films for over 20 years across documentary, fiction, experimental, and dance genres. She recently received her Doctor of Social Sciences degree, yay, from the College of Interdisciplinary Studies at Royal Roads University. So that's why I'll be calling her Dr. Abbott ceaselessly and every chance I have, even though I know her as Sarah. I try usually to not be too big on titles here. I think in the context today, it's worth doing. You can find her online at www.sarah with an H Abbott 2b's2t's.ca. No doctor in that URL. Her talk is titled "The Giving Tree as Misguided Heartswelling: Critical Considerations of Shel Silverstein's children's book and Relations Beyond the Human." Before I send it over to Sarah, Dr. Sarah, I will be hosting the session and keeping everybody's mics off. You can, of course, help me with that. You might want to leave your cameras on. It's always fun to speak to real people and then just back squares. That's up to you, of course. I encourage you to ask any questions you have through the chat functions during the presentation if you want to remember them. But we'll get to the Q&A after the presentation. And I'll let Dr. Abbott present first, and then we can have a bit of a dialogue after that. So Dr. Abbott, it's up to you.
Thank you so much, Jérôme. That was a beautiful introduction. And I'm so happy to see everybody. Hi. Thank you for coming. It's a really busy time of year, so making an hour to hang out and talk about trees is awesome, and thank you. I'd also maybe just ask us all to just take a couple of breaths. I know it's a nice way to kind of gather ourselves here and reconnect to our moments together and our bodies. And I invite you to join me in your own way in acknowledging the land in and of itself and all of the non-humans organic and inorganic, that are with us on this life. And also I would like to acknowledge the original human inhabitants here on Treaty 4 territory, the Nehiyawak, the Anishinaabeg, the Nakota, Lakota, Dakota peoples, and the Métis and Michif nations. Yeah, and just to remember that the dark legacy of colonialism is also still with us. And Jerome, thank you so much for organizing this Living Heritage sharing series and for inviting me to participate. It's an honor and fun to share this newish work with you. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my, okay, so there's the title. And I'd like to take a moment to give a special acknowledgement to the trees for the life and love they bring to our planet. And personally, it's been an honor to work with them for my doctoral research. As you know, my talk is based in the children's book, The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein. This talk emerged from a shared reading I did over the phone with my friend Jean in Little Rock, Arkansas last summer. I had recently and finally purchased The Giving Tree after many people, upon hearing of my doctoral research with trees, told me I absolutely had to read this amazing book since I had not encountered it before. After I finished the reading with Jean, we both felt teary. Then a silent confusion settled in before Jean said, "Now, what was the point of that now?" In the context of my doctoral research with trees as sentient, intelligent, conscious beings, I became angry with the story's perpetuation of human views of trees and non-humans as resources rather than conative entities, meaningful to themselves in their unique efforts to survive and actualize their inherent potentials, and deeply embedded in their own life force, purpose, and interconnections with the environments they interact with as home and community. In summary, research for my interdisciplinary doctorate of social sciences degree focused on the sentient intelligence of trees as agentic, conscious entities with unique ontologies, perspectives, and lifeways, alive in ongoing relational inter-response and action with their communities. Inquiries and considerations were framed and entangled with ontological emergence theory, Indigenous epistemologies and research methodologies, and public ethnography integrated with plant science, philosophies from the recent ontological and non-human turns, interspecies communication, and ethnographic film production. The images of trees and humans in this PowerPoint participated in my research. To set the context for this talk, we can refresh our understanding of living heritage through this definition that appears on the Heritage Saskatchewan website. Living heritage are those values, beliefs, and ways of living we inherit from past generations that we still use to understand the present and make choices for the future. I really like the simplicity of this definition and its highlighting of the flow and engagement with knowledge over time. The UNESCO definition holds more detail and recognizes the intangibilities of living culture. This is becoming more and more familiar to us as we engage with this series. Practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith. The communities, groups, and in some cases, individuals recognize as part of their cultural heritage. This intangible cultural heritage transmitted from generation to generation is constantly recreated by community groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature and their history, and provides them with a sense of identity and continuity, thus promoting respect for cultural diversity and human creativity. Regarding children's literature, representations, expressions, knowledge, artifacts, and cultural spaces, intangible cultural heritage, transmission from generation, and provision of a sense of identity and continuity are aspects in the ways living heritage moves and is active. Concerning trees and human relations with non-humans, there is an implicit bias towards humans in the UNESCO definition. because it is written for humans by humans who generally do not consider the lively, agentic presence of non-humans with whom they share kinship. To be more specific, to me, it reflects a Western or modern human point of view that is informed by the belief that humans and nature are separate, and that ultimately humans are meant to dominate over nature and non-humans. I think the UNESCO definition would be different if it came from an Indigenous perspective that recognizes interconnected relations with nature. Creating a definition for living heritage that incorporates the meaning of the Indigenous phrase, all my relations, would make space for non-humans and dramatically shift the ways modern humans relate with them. As Richard Wagamis explains, to understand this phrase is to come to understand that you are alive because everything else is. Indigenous people and cultures have been engaging relationally with inherent understandings of the infinite interconnections among all organic, inorganic, and life force elements and aspects of our worlds for millennia. This is ancient knowledge that all humans connect back to, and it is the profound meaning of the title of the University of Regina's 2025 Strategic Plan, All Our Relations. Going forward, when I refer to people in my talk, I mean those of us who have been educated through Western colonial ideologies that consider humans as separate from all organic and inorganic life on Earth and in the universe, that consider these elements solely as resources for human taking and well-being. Here is a definition of Indigenous living heritage written by Karen Aird and Gretchen Fox in association with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO's IDEA Lab. Cultural heritage is often understood in the realms of physical or tangible elements such as landscapes, monuments, tools, dwellings, trails, foods, and works of art. It is the intangible elements such as songs, stories, dance, teachings, memories, knowledge, and ceremonies called living heritage that give meaning to tangible heritage and which stand alone as heritage values. Indigenous cultures are primarily oral cultures, and as such, living or intangible heritage are the foundations of governance structures, legal traditions, important protocols and ceremonies, social structures, and specialized knowledge systems. These living traditions are unequivocally linked to the land and cannot be truly understood outside of that context. In considering living heritage from an Indigenous perspective, it is important to attune to the concepts of Indigenous cultural heritage. As Aird and Fox write, it is difficult to find a direct translation for cultural heritage in Indigenous languages. The closest translations often relate to the sacred or to knowing oneself. Indigenous peoples understand and describe cultural heritage according to their perspectives, traditions, and languages. While creating one definition of Indigenous heritage is difficult, generally this would include ideas, experiences, worldviews, objects, forms of expression, practices, knowledge, spirituality, kinship ties, places, and land valued by Indigenous peoples. Each of these concepts is inextricably interconnected, holds intrinsic value to the well-being of Indigenous peoples, and affects all generations. So we can let these definitions of living heritage resonate throughout my talk, the remainder of which is arranged in 4 parts. I'll be sharing a reading of The Giving Tree, so we're refreshed and knowledgeable of the story together, followed by a brief discussion of Shel Silverstein and public and scholarly views of The Giving Tree. Then I'll talk about The Giving Tree through the lens of my doctoral research and findings, and conclude with a short conclusion on reflections of The Giving Tree and misguidedness. So I'm sure many of you are very aware of, I'm sure many of you, catch that before it goes away. I'm sure many of you are very aware of the short illustrated tale that is The Giving Tree, published by HarperCollins in 1964. It continues to be a top-ranking book since its initial breakaway success and has been translated into many languages. Multiple sources indicate different amounts of book sales, with 5 million by the book's 50th anniversary in 2014 and 8.5 million by 2011. Shel Silverstein was born in 1930 in Chicago and died in 1999 in Key West, Florida. As encyclopedic Encyclopedia Britannica describes him. Silverstein was a prolific cartoonist, children's author, poet, songwriter, and playwright, and is best known for his light verse and quirky cartoons. He was an artist who significantly impacted American culture. So we're going to pause the recording for this reading. So people at home who are not live with us later, you can please take some time to read or listen to the book yourself if you're not familiar with it. You might wonder, as Jean and I did, what the point of this story or story poem is. My research for this talk took me into unexpected territory and a seemingly endless and overwhelming rabbit hole of public and scholarly literary criticism and mystery around Shel Silverstein. Full of variations, complexities, and contradictions, sentimentality, great appreciation, and disgust, if not rage. My findings and the book were not as simple, straightforward, or even as totally misguided as I thought they would be. In relation to living heritage, it is now common knowledge, Faustino writes, that children are socialized from birth by parents, community, other children, and a barrage of messages from the media, entertainment, billboards, etc. One highly influential mode of inculturation is children's literature, especially picture books for the very young, with images as well as words to convey messages with both overt and implicit. For Faustino and many others, the Giving Tree's widespread influence on children invites careful scrutiny. For 50 years, the Giving Tree has been loved by children and adults and provoked outrage and acclaim. As Cousin indicates, since the initial publication, scholars, students, and many others have offered a variety of interpretations and critiques of this short yet provocative work, calling into question not only how women, metaphorically, men and children interact, but also how we as a global society decide to manage our future. As Collins writes, some readers see it as the story of God and humankind, or Mother Nature and society, or the classical parent-child relationship, or unrequited love. Some believe it's a book of adult satire, while others write it off as unbearably sad. The Giving Tree is widely used as an education tool to illustrate Christian self-sacrifice and as an aid in preparing children for catechism. According to the book jacket, it is a parable of love and consolation. In 1988, the book was banned from a public library in Colorado because it was interpreted as being sexist. The Giving Tree appears in lists of books on natural resources and in countless early childhood teaching units on trees, Faustino writes. But the only way to read this book as an environmental parable is to read against its grain, sarcastically, and bring political or theoretical sensibilities from outside the text to create an interpretation not suggested directly by the words or images. As Croak notes, criticisms of the Giving Tree outweigh its praises in terms of scholarship. The Giving Tree is included on both lists of children's books that are must-reads and lists of books to avoid. Its place as children's or adult literature is also questioned. For Beppy here, an Edmonton-based preschool music teacher and children's music performer, the Giving Tree opens up conversation about uncomfortable things which may be hidden or easy to ignore, particularly in regard to relationships and how we treat others. Shepard, in his book titled Your Favorite Book Sucks, feels the Giving Tree is nothing but a book of terrible relationship advice that will ensure you die alone, with the lesson that people will only be your friend if you do what they want, and that anyone who doesn't give you whatever you ask for is not your friend. He thinks reading the Giving Tree to our youngest, most impressionable minds, like some refined nugget of folk wisdom, needs to stop. Cousin considers the Reading Tree as a parable for giving too much to the detriment of the receiver and the consequences of failing to uphold our duty of care to one another, despite our best, even loving intentions. To this end, she feels the book holds valuable lessons that can be applied to the work of humanitarian agencies, such as the UN's World Food Programme, so that humanitarian action does not limit people's future capabilities. The Giving Tree is one of several books Wartenberg has used to teach philosophy to primary school children because, quote, children's literature very often focuses on fundamental philosophical ideas. In the video picture book Philosophy, responding to the Giving Tree, Shadonia says, I like that she's being nice, but why do you have to give away everything? You gave him the big part of you. You gave away your own self. Isaac says, if he didn't cut down the tree's branch, how's he going to live? He's just going to stay cold. The tree said yes because the tree knew he'd have no food, nothing. What I came to see inside the rabbit hole of research into the Giving Tree is that all the energy and diversity around interpretations of Silverstein's story comes from its almost blank canvas. Its simple text, basic black and white drawings, and lack of context enable and invite the knowledge bases and cultural spaces within readers' living heritage to influence their understandings of the Giving Tree. As Faustino states, adults feed children the same lessons they were fed, often without critical awareness and often out of a misguided sense that it's just for kids and those books don't affect me, as her college students often claim. Many of those students love the book as children, a love likely informed by the intimate spaces in which the book was read to them. They resist feminist and cultural critique, quote, idealizing the tree's unconditional love because it's a lot like my mom, while recognizing the boy's selfishness. Even college professors to whom Faustino has presented her research findings sometimes require lengthy proofs to see the problem of the feminine in the Giving Tree. I found in my research that adults who loved the book as children had a shocked change of heart and view when reading the book much later because their cultural space and knowledge bases had shifted. For them, the Giving Tree is no longer appropriate as the perfect baby gift, a library mainstay, and a classroom cornerstone. I'll give the last word to Shadonia as I move into my perceptions of the Giving Tree. She says, I disagree with Isaac because we need the environment. We need the environment so we can stay safe. Through the lens of my doctoral research, I'll speak to three of my intertwined responses of the Giving Tree: human-centered representation, the sentience and agency of trees, and interspecies communication between trees and humans. The way Silverstein represents the story's characters and activities as floating and isolated echoes and enforces Western beliefs that nature and culture, non-humans and humans, are separate. As Miller writes, the tree remains contextless in the story. We do not know whether the tree is part of a forest, the boy's suburban backyard, a European forest, an apple orchard filled with pesticides, or a small organic farm. Similarly, the boy's location is not named. He interacts, Miller continues, with the tree as a resource, a commodity, that Heidegger calls standing reserve. She can be used up completely, even destroyed, in order to satisfy the boy's never-ending consumer yearnings. The Giving Tree is represented and characterized by her giving, by her ability and desire to give until she gives all of herself away. The way people have come to see non-humans, the environment, and the climate as existing solely for the benefit of human needs and pleasures. In the book, as in modern life, there are few, if any, gestures of acknowledgement or reciprocity. There is little to no consideration of the giving, and it is endless, that trees do for their own survival, for the community of non-humans in their midst, and for the existence of all life on the planet. As Adnanis indicates, research on Norwegian spruce felled for Christmas has revealed that as many as 25,000 individual organisms live on a single tree. Oak trees host potentially over 400 different organisms. As we know, the South American rainforest and the boreal forest in northern Canada and Russia are the primary lungs of the earth. In a research paper co-authored by Maria Velez in the Department of Geography here at the University of Regina, it was found by looking at sedimentation cores that it took approximately 300 years for ancient Mayan pollution to be cleared from a Guatemalan lake, while the adjacent forest took 20 to 40 years to tidy up. We're seeing incredible rejuvenation by the forest that has moved into the Chernobyl nuclear accident site. The giving tree is personified and used as a metaphor for a parable about human relations. Silverstein does not take into respectful consideration the reality of the sentient agency of trees, or as Martyr puts it, that vegetal life is coextensive with a distinct subjectivity with which we might truly engage, and which engages us more frequently than we imagine. As Lavallee writes, from an Indigenous perspective, all concerned are connected to all other living things. The story of one cannot be understood outside the story of the whole. Barad comments that the Western distinction between object and subject feeds representationalist thinking, which means that the mind perceives only mental images, representations of material objects outside the mind, not the objects themselves. This in turn feeds a system of thought that fixes the world as an object and resource for human subjects, writes Bolt. The relation of care, Bolt writes of Heidegger's concept of handleability, defies representationalism because it moves away from understanding as a cognitive faculty that is imposed on existence and abstract thinking about the world. Barad calls for accountability to the specific materializations of which we are a part. The rapacious, ecocidal, anthropocentric behavior that representationalism supports has resulted in more than 15 billion trees being cut down each year, and the global number of trees falling by approximately 46% since the start of human civilization, as reported in 2015 in a study by Crowther and his colleagues. Since then, the clearing, fragmentation, or degradation of forests has been accelerating, Niver writes in 2019. This past December 2020, 350 to 800-year-old eucalyptus trees, with decades of generations of cultural relations with First Peoples in Australia, were chainsawed to make space for a 12.5 kilometer highway rerouting for a saving of 5 minutes of driving time. As plant scientists Mancuso and Chiravis advocate, trees and plants are purposive, deliberative, innovative, agential entities controlling their own existence. In the late 1970s, Anthony Chiravis put forward the controversial suggestion of intelligence in plants based on his research into how plants perceive signals from their environment and how they interpret those signals, which result in changes in behavior. He realized that the signals and behavior which we easily associate with intelligent behavior in animals were effectively identical phenomena going on in plants, but coming out in different, much slower ways. He defines intelligence as adaptively variable behavior during the life cycle of the individual, profiting from experience, capacity for problem solving, fulfilled by plants in the appropriate circumstances. Oddly enough, he continued, the person who really started a lot of this off was Charles Darwin. A lot of the information in his plant study books are easily seen as intelligent behavior. As Mancuso writes, for centuries, biologists and botanists had purposefully avoided conceptualizing intelligent forms of plant behavior, trying by every means to safeguard the validity of time-honored categories of animals and plants. Chiravis commented that we put the human gloss on everything so that when we want to talk about intelligence, we're really thinking about human intelligence only. Regarding the intelligence of trees, Mancuso states that trees are extraordinary beings in every respect. You do not become the primary source of the planet's life by chance. As Simon Leadbeater and I write, the idea of trees having sentience intrigues and polarizes people. The precise meaning of sentience, Hobson, Weston Davies indicate, is contested in science and philosophy, but could be summarized as the ability to experience pleasure and pain. For Mancuso and Viola, sentience means capable of perceiving. For Ryder, it entails the ability to experience sensation. For Marino, the sentience is a multidimensional, subjective phenomena that refers to the depth of awareness of an individual possesses. Brown indicates that sentience is usually regarded as an aspect of consciousness along with intelligence and self-awareness. Although contention on the subjects of perception, intelligence, communication, sentience, and consciousness in plants remains prevalent, scientific research and public awareness of these phenomena have been accelerating over the past 4 decades. The giving tree can actually speak with the human boy. And this story is how Silverstein incorporates such an incredible thing as that. I see this as a shamefully wasted metaphor full of problematic authorial projections now that I know through my research that trees and plants can have communicative exchanges with humans, an intangible reality and aspect of living heritage that Western ideologies and science have disparaged and disregarded since Plato and Aristotle disrupted knowing in kinship with plants. But of course, Silverstein was influenced by that thinking, so I cannot hold him 100% accountable. I'll share 4 stories from my research regarding tree-human communication. On the topic of boys and trees, one of my research participants, interspecies communicator Mary Getton, told me a story about a boy in Washington State who had close relations with trees in the forest where his home was located. On one occasion, a tree told the boy exactly where a missing and lost elderly man was located, which was the same location in which he was found later by the search and rescue team, and he was alive. On another occasion, the tree told the boy there was a fire in the forest 5 hours before human firefighters became aware of it. When we were with this grandmother elm, as Mayor Cromwell refers to the tree, the elm spoke at length to or through Cromwell. This is what the elm had to say about the knowledge of trees. I have so much I could share. How many days do you want to hang out with me? Do you know how much wisdom us trees have? And she's telling Mayor, like it's like a library. She's saying, you think your libraries have a lot of information? Oh, you have no idea how much we have. We have so much knowledge and wisdom. It would be really nice if more people just started tuning into us to gather some of this, because a lot of this isn't found in any books, nor is a lot of it meant to be in any book. And remember where books come from. Books are made from trees too. Have you thought about thanking the trees that made up the book you hold? During our interview from my research, Elder Doreen Spence shared a story that stands as a good rule of awareness when stepping into non-human territories. She had been asked by German acquaintances if she would take them into an Alberta forest. I quote her now. We got out of the car and this old guy puts his backpack on and he was going to go in. And I said to him, no, it's not our right just to walk into the forest and just do what we do. I said, no, you have to ask permission. And those trees went still, like very still. And then as soon as I asked for permission, gave my offering, their little leaves started clapping, and they were just very happy that we asked permission to go into the forest and we wouldn't harm anything, that we wouldn't be taking anything. We were just going to enjoy the breath and the beauty and their experience with them. Lastly, one of the findings of my study is that trees want to collaborate with humans to bring the environment and climate back into balance. While filming and communicating with Jim Conroy and a very old ash tree, I asked the ash if it has any message for people of the world in terms of how we are as a human species. Conroy translated an internal message he received from the ash as, it's almost like a choking person. Then he spoke the words he received from the ash. That's the way it's getting to be for us, because we're big and we need to breathe too. Beings of nature are very stressed and they need lots of help right now. In short conclusion to this presentation, my feeling about the existence of the giving tree on the planet relates to an overall deep aching sense of loss, disappointment, and anger that people had hundreds and thousands of years to be more ethical, reciprocal, appreciative, and empathetic in relationship with the environment, and we have not. Instead, our living heritage has involved tangible and intangible transmissions from generation to generation, constantly recreated by communities and groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature and their history, providing them with a sense of identity and continuity, and I will add entitlement to dominion over the planet. The anthropocentric destruction of trees, non-humans, land, and the climate are reflected in Silverstein's story, but only if the components of our living heritage guide us to see it. So we are like 10 minutes before 2, and I'm very aware of that, but I was going to show you pieces of this really great performance. So I think I'll just show you the beginning and put the link in the chat. I highly recommend that you watch it. So this is a recording called "The Giving Tree is Pissed Off," and by Alex Otis, and I'll show you the first 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Abbott, for your talk today and for bringing these ideas around living heritage to I guess a part of this intangible heritage that we don't often think about, and to expand the boundaries of what we really see as intangible heritage.